Hi, it's Joel. Welcome back. Today let's talk about Eastward. Eastward is one of my favorite projects I have ever worked on. I was involved with Eastward from 2016 to its release in 2021, so that was about 5 years for the main game. And actually, I'm still involved in Eastward. They just announced DLC called Octopia, for which I composed the soundtrack. But today I wanted to talk specifically about this track called Strange Quest, which actually started fairly late, believe it or not, in the process. I think I wrote Strange Quest probably somewhere around 2019 or 2020. This first track we did was Alva. You know, I think part of what I really enjoy about this process is, and I alluded to this in my last video, which is I'm not just a composer, I'm also a consultant. So my job is let's figure out what your game sounds like. So with Pixpill, we created all this music that we felt really fit the game, but we also had the luxury of maybe a longer development process than anticipated. And I was like, well, let's use this to our advantage. I decided, all right, I think we did a really good job here of capturing this like high resolution version of chiptune in all the music we made, but we still need to kind of accentuate and temper this whole soundtrack with some tracks that lean a little bit more heavily into 8-bit and 16-bit sounds and aesthetics. So there was an opportunity to use my childhood Nintendo. This is a smooth top Nintendo. Those of you know that that are familiar with this era know that they went to like sort of a more matte rough top after this. So I also have this cartridge called the MIDI NES. You've got this MIDI cable hanging out of it. I actually use this for the track Strange Quest that I would like to break down today and show you how we did it. So this is the project file for the track that ended up being called Strange Quest, so if you look at the top here, you'll notice this track isn't called Strange Quest, at least not yet. It's called Indie Direct Trailer version 1. And then there's another name after that, Indie Direct Trailer Extended Arrangement version 1C. So this track evolved out of a track that was originally done for a trailer. It's also in the game, although this track that was adapted from the game and kind of polished up for the trailer ended up being my favorite version of this track. And I thought kind of the most polished version that I wanted to include on this soundtrack. So I'm not going to break the whole thing down today. It's got a lot of layers, and you can see that it's fairly long. It's 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and that would make for a really long video. I thought maybe let's just break down kind of this first 16-bar section. So let's listen to the first 8 bars of that section, and then we'll talk about it. So this is very much an homage to 8-bit music. What I drew a lot of inspiration from, and it's probably pretty clear listening to this, if you're familiar with Takashi Tateshi's music for the Mega Man series, I drew a lot of inspiration from that, because even though it's a very different series mechanically from Eastward, it is to me really kind of one of the highlights of 8-bit music. So one of the things that a lot of that music did, and actually I think across the NES, there are 4 sound generators on the NES. There's 2 pulse waves, a triangle wave, and a noise generator. And actually on some they're capable of playing samples. And actually, if you look here, there's a track of that. So let's listen to that in a second. I found that the triangle wave, interestingly enough, a lot of composers used it for bass, but a lot of composers sort of used it also for this ostinato part. And a lot of times, even when it was the bass line, it was much higher than most bass lines. And so you can hear it here if I solo it up. So this is very much kind of a callback to the way composers in the NES era used the triangle wave. It's got this great slippery kind of character to it, and I just love it. And nothing quite sounds the same unless it's actually coming out of an NES. So authenticity was a big part of this. Let's listen to that now, along with the noise part, which kind of plays hi-hats and snare, and the pulse part, which doubles up kind of and enhances and enriches the triangle waves part. So that last part, kind of that fill, also very much an homage to the way that phrases were ended and new parts were introduced. So let's listen to that again with everything. Not the whole thing, just enough to kind of get an idea of what the other elements kind of bring to this. So we've got a lead sound here, which for me, I think it's really just a workflow thing. Ironically, I didn't use the lead sounds from the NES. I tend to use this synth called Ace, which is one of my absolute favorites, just because it's so easy to get a sound up and dial in something that's usable and expressive. So here, it's easy for me to just get a square wave and kind of have that square wave bring in vibrato. I have pressure on my keyboard routed to vibrato, so it's very easy to just play something in. It's also really easy to kind of change the character of the sound just with the pulse width. So you can go from something that's very hollow, like a 50% square wave, to something that's much more chiptune just by varying the pulse width. And then it's combined with this FM bell sound, which those sounds, of course, were not possible in the NES era. But to me, that's kind of my version of bringing in some of those enhancements to the genre the same way the game does with its lighting and its color palette. So let's listen to just a little bit more development here as this continues. So you can see there's one more track of NES here. All these blue tracks are rendered as audio, I should say. So let's solo that up. So those are just drum samples, but they're actually rendered through the NES. They're part of the NES, the MIDI NES cart, and they're played back with this great crunchy kind of distortion. There's a bass line that comes in. Another Ace sound, actually based, well, very much the default patch, just with a couple little changes, and a lead sound. So this is, again, very similar to the patch I just showed you, but the pulse width is 83, which is the same as 17. It's just the pulse width in the opposite way. So let's solo that up. So the NES parts are kind of used for backing parts, and the more modern plugins are used to kind of enhance those backing parts. So as the track continues, more parts come in. Let's listen to a little bit of development. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Here we have actually an acoustic drum kit comes in. I tucked it into the mix, but I think against all the really kind of crunchy chiptune sounds, it creates this really full quality, even though it's not super obvious that it's in there when it comes in. But I think it really kind of brings things out and brings the energy of the track out and makes it feel much bigger. There's also this is one of my favorite bass sounds. And this is actually just a preset from Massive, one of my favorite sounds called Transient Funk. I think I have this chain with just a little bit of EQ and compression saved as a preset because I use this all the time. It's just got such a great attack, and it really comes through. So what else do we have? We've got, here I've actually got a lead sound from a Korg MS-20. Another pulse sound, but just a slightly different character, a little bit different than the NES, a little bit different than Ace, just kind of has a vintage quality to it. So that's kind of how the track develops, but you can see it, if we zoom out, it's got this core of at least all of these sounds are from the MIDI NES, and other things are sprinkled throughout. So that's very similar to kind of how I approached the other sounds from the Eastward soundtrack that have a chiptune, or I should say an 8-bit influence, chiptune being sort of more of a modern genre term. So that's kind of where I think I'm going to stop for now. I think I could keep going, but this could very easily turn into an hour-long video, which, maybe I should do at some point on a stream or something so I can answer questions. That might make more sense. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any other requests, questions, and I will hopefully see you soon. Thanks.